I'm going to start
Well,
shortly. Just waiting. We're on
yeah.
Bermuda time right now, so I'm going to start shortly as people come
Oh,
in. 2 more minutes at 7:05. I'm giving people an opportunity before I start the presentation. But just bear with me. We're on Bermuda time, and people tend to, come in from work and, take the time to, get back on the system. So let's just wait for a few minutes. Okay, other people are going to be joining, but because
I
time's of the essence, I'm going to start the presentation. Hello, Paul. At this time, I want to open up the floor to John Molson, who I had already described as a world-class athlete and vice president of Immunitech. Everyone say hello to John. So John and I will be doing some dialogue, and I'm going to question him on some questions on about the product and also about his personal life. So, John, what does it feel like to be a world-class cyclist? Are you still cycling?
I still train, and even though I'm retired, I try and live a pro lifestyle every day. My son is a professional athlete, and my father was a very, very good athlete and could have played actually in the NHL many years ago when there was only six teams, but his father disagreed with that, so he ended up buying the team instead.
Mhm.
So, I was exposed to sports at a very early age, and I still live that lifestyle. I train probably on average 24 hours a week, and my training has changed because now my focus is not trying to win races and time trials, but trying to be as straight as possible. So I focus on my spine, on mobility, on balance, on motricity, on footwork speed, strength, agility, all these things that affect how we age. And so I also, if you get within 5 feet of me, I'll start talking to you about it too and encourage you to work out. So I'm very dangerous.
I will keep talking because I love fitness. And it's so funny because I actually bought a bike several years ago, one of those fast bikes, one of those, it was, what's it called? It was a name brand bike. I bought it in Florida. I bought two. And on my way to the airport, one of them actually crashed in the middle of the road. So my husband said, well, that means we can't both ride together. But it was a Cannondale, one of those bikes.
Cannondale, sure.
Yes, I have one of those, and I got a little frightened when the wind came, but I need to get some proper lessons on how to cycle on that. But yeah, it was just amazing. I feel really great, paddling and cycling. It just brings up my adrenaline gland, and I feel really relaxed. It's a nice feeling. So I can see why your family went in that direction.
I was very privileged to work with Dr. Wolf Droge because I never really, when you're young, you don't think of aging and you don't think of unhealthy aging versus healthy aging, unhealthy brain aging versus healthy brain aging. And working with Dr. Droge, I really got to understand that. And, the maxim is the less you do, the less you can do. So, if you look at the way a child moves, there's no restriction. And, the way we move gradually becomes more and more restricted over time. And so you have to find out ways to, move in ways that keep your ability to move that way. And so, whether it's dance, whether it's different types of martial arts, etc., all those things are great for your muscles, but also stimulate your central nervous system, your brain, etc. So you have to keep stimulating your brain, keep stimulating those things to keep them active. Otherwise, you decline.
Oh, wow, that's true, yes. So how long have you been with Immunitech? What is your role there?
Well, I was with, I was essentially an owner of Roberts Evergreen with Chuck Roberts. And when we merged with Immunitech, I, um, I was vice president of research and development. So I worked directly with Dr. Bunos from 1996 on. And when we sold the company, we still had a lot of scientific work that I had started. And so, I said to Maurizio, look, I've been handling this. I've got to stay on to be able to finish this stuff. And so I stayed on and, things like the autism patent, which you saw, we
Yes.
have two other patents in process. There's a number of experimental studies as well as a very important clinical study on the brain that is now completed. So I'm overseeing those things and
Is that,
doing things like this, talking to your gang,
I love that. So
which is a
with
great privilege.
and likewise, what is the difference between a Minocal regular, platinum, and the sport? I mean, some people pose that question because there's three products, and sometimes it could become a little difficult in explaining all three. But can you go into a little bit more detail of what's the difference between these three brands? The
Yeah,
regular, which
I would focus on the ingredients and, the Immunical, as you know, was developed over a long period of time. And, Dr. Bunos, many years ago by accident, found that this particular whey protein exhibited a property that he didn't fully understand why it was doing what it was doing. And so he was very fortunate that he worked in an environment where Dr. Patricia Kongshaven was there, as well as other scientists that I've actually worked with now that helped him and Dr. Kongshaven understand why Immunical was exerting this very important effect on the immune response. And he used a number of models. So, Immunical, from the lab where it was originally produced, and then when it became commercially produced, Dr. Bunos traveled all over the United States to try and find a dairy that met his specifications, and he found one in Glanbia. And so over the years, we were able to collaborate with the scientists at Glanbia on very specific specifications for Immunical. And, the focus was this glutathione enhancing capacity. And, this is a very, very delicate property. And, commercial whey proteins exhibit vastly different capacities to essentially influence this. And so the whole focus of Immunitech over the years was to refine this particular process. So Immunical is essentially, an iteration of that original work. And, over a 40-year period, it still stands the test of time. Now, when Dr. Bunos retired, we were very fortunate to get Dr. Wolf Droog, who, as he explained to me, he said, John, I had offers from pharmaceutical companies sitting on my desk from all over the world, but I came to work at Immunitech because I wanted to move to Canada, but also because Immunical is something that I was very interested in because, his whole focus was what's called redox physiology. So he has been working on glutathione, on cysteine for many, many years. And he looked at Immunical as the optimal way to essentially stabilize glutathione and enhance glutathione over a long period of time. So he was an expert in many fields, including in the field of aging, and he knew there are many risk factors associated with the aging process that through small amounts of supplementation on a daily basis, you may be able to essentially reduce the risk of developing issues. And so that's why he developed Immunical Platinum, which contains one ingredient is creatine. And, he noticed through his research work that part of the population become insulin resistant as they age. And so this small amount of creatine may help reduce that. In addition, due to dietary changes, people can become more acidic, which is a leading cause or is a cause of osteoporosis. And so the citric acids in there are meant to help alkalize the body and counteract, that acid effect. And a few years ago, through our collaborations in sports, which, I started many years ago working with, because I was an athlete, I gave Immunical to my friends and, we became more and more involved with sports teams informally. And then through our work with Oracle and Dr. Nathan Lewis, who's on our scientific advisory board and an expert in sports nutrition, we developed Immunical Sport. And essentially, Immunical Sport is kind of like the Immunical with a turbocharger on it. So there are ingredients in Immunical Sport that improve our blood flow. So, you're not talking about, magnitudes of effect, but small increments of effect. And, the way to think about how these products impact you and the way I explain it to physicians, coaches, etc., it's the very small changes that compound over time. And so if you can make very small changes in performance and recovery in a professional athlete, over the course of 6 months, those very small changes become very big changes, because 1% at the professional level is huge. And, it was said by Nike Oregon Track Club coach who we worked with through Oracle. And, these people at Nike Oregon Track Club, you're talking about Olympic gold medalists, the top athletes in the United States. He said, sports at our level comes down to a 1% difference, and we feel that Immunical gives us that 1%. So, when I explain it and, you look at the uses, focus on the ingredients because those ingredients are in there for specific reasons.
Yes, actually, it's interesting you're saying that because I actually found a study where Immunical was given to some elderly clients, patients, and one of them was taking medication. And she went to the doctor and she asked the doctor if she could take Immunical Platinum, while taking this product for her burns. And he says, well, if it's a natural supplement, it shouldn't have any impact. Just take it over about an hour away from her medication. So during the study, she came back and they had to do a burn scan. And they found out of the 3 women that were on this medication, she was the only one that was able to actually increase her more burn mass. That was amazing. That was really amazing. So I was interested in that. So what is the minimum and maximum age of ingesting Immunical? What would be the minimum age that one can have? And which one would you see?
After a woman is finished breastfeeding, you can supplement the child. I gave it to my kids from a very early age.
Wow.
And you're talking about the maximum age as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, any age. It's the important thing is like exercise. As I mentioned, your body adapts to the environment you create and the environment you live in. And that's why we're on this earth is because, glutathione or the glutathione antioxidant system is one of the principal mechanisms that allows us to adapt to our environment, both good influences and bad influences. So taking it over time, makes us more resilient to some of the negative things that may influence us. And, probably the biggest one there is pollution and the effects of pollution that we see. And, pollution is everywhere. And you look at the new research on, plastics in the environment and, how plastics get into our system. Some of the air pollution that gets into our system as well. So these things are, the way the literature that I read, is that, and the weakness with testing is these things are tested individually in the lab, but in the environment, they all mix together. And so you have, many unwanted results because of that.
Interesting. I can believe that because these free radicals from stress and pollution, they really do harm to the body. So like you mentioned, Immunical will be able to boost the immune system and help to sort of eradicate some of the stresses that the body takes on from outside forces. Very well said. Can you take Immunical if you have a milk allergy? And does it cause bloating? And what does it mean by under nature?
Yeah, so if you have a milk protein allergy, probably not. But if you have a lactose allergy, you could take it. And some people do get bloating when they take the product. Everybody's different. And if you sit in an auditorium and give 100 people coffee, you're going to have some people, it perks them up. Some people puts them to sleep. Some people no effect. And so when you do clinical trials, you always have variability. So you're going to always have some people that will have bloating. And undenatured essentially means that these proteins are preserved in their native conformation or native form to the greatest degree possible. And think of it, when you open an egg and you don't cook it, you see the structure of the egg. When you cook it, that structure changes. So you're changing the conformation of those proteins by heating it. And the same thing occurs with whey proteins.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. How much Immunical to consume, and can you overdose on Immunical? Does it contain any additives or antibiotics? And does vitamin C compete with Immunical?
Why don't you ask me one question at a time?
I know that's quite a bit. Okay, so how much Immunical to consume?
Okay. So, all our research was done on 20 grams, except, of course, for children, where there's a specific dose formula for children. So 20 grams, the standard dose per day is 10 grams. And the key is to take it day in, day out, and not, 3 months and then 3 months off. As you well know, cancer cells and all these viruses don't take a day off. They're around us all the time, so you can't afford it.
Can you overdose on Immunical?
Dr. Droge said to me something very interesting. He said, everything in nature is a poison depending on the dose. Mm-hmm. So that's very profound when you think about it.
The dose makes the poison.
So theoretically, of course, so you don't want to take too much.
Everything in moderation, as one would say.
Yeah.
Does it contain any additives or antibiotics?
Immunical does not.
Okay. Does vitamin C compete with Immunical? Vitamin C, does it have any?
No, it does not. As Dr. Bunos explained, the glutathione antioxidant system is the principal antioxidant system in the body. And vitamin C and vitamin E form part of that. So when vitamin C donates a hydrogen molecule, it's glutathione that reconstitutes vitamin C. So the other tenet that Dr. Droge explained to me, he says, that what you want ideally in the cell is an equilibrium where you have a balance between free radical production and free radical clearance. So in excess of either is not good. So, there's many things in Chinese medicine where they talk about the yin and the yang and balance, etc. Well, there's some truth to that. And so the same thing here is that you want to have an equilibrium, just like with your diet. You need a diversity of different proteins, fruits, and legumes. And the same thing with regard to oxidants and antioxidants. You need an equilibrium.
Great. What are your success rates with all brands of Immunical, and how long can one stay on this product? I guess this is probably a question.
Yeah, well, the company's, still in business, so I think that it's probably pretty good. And, we've been publishing scientific and clinical research over a 40-year period. So that's like giving Immunical a final exam every year when we do those studies, because, we live and die by that data. And we've shown consistently that the Immunical has performed over the last 40 years.
Oh, that speaks volumes about this product. It really does, and that's what makes me feel excited about sharing the knowledge with people, so they can see that there's something out in this world that can help to detox and to help their body to offset a lot of these pathogens. Can pregnant women take Immunical during, after, or with breastfeeding? I want to know that as well.
Okay, the first question was, can pregnant women take Immunical?
During pregnancy, after, and breastfeeding. Is it all three?
Yes. Regular Immunical. And, it's really, again, really interesting. If you look at the scientific literature on pregnancies in women living in polluted environments, it's actually this pollution gets to the fetus. And so, ideally, and I would definitely recommend pregnant women take Immunical.
Well, that is so amazing, because when you look at supplements, or any type of product, it's always check with your doctor, or, if you're pregnant, but this product can actually override that because that's how good it is. And that's just amazing. That tells me that this is top of the line, product that's good for the body. Can you explain the scientific literature and peer review success?
Yeah, when we formed this company with Dr. Bunos and Dieter Beer, I found genius, and I didn't have to change anything. And the whole way that Dr. Bunos went about looking at questions was through the scientific method. And the scientific method is such that, you have a hypothesis, and you test that hypothesis. And so when you set up these studies, essentially you're asking a question to Immunical, and you have to make sure that you're asking the right question, because Immunical works a certain way. It doesn't work the same way, for instance, that aspirin does or our medication does. It works in a very particular way. So you have to ask the right question in the right patient population. And so what you do is essentially, we want to answer certain questions. We find a professor or a research scientist at an institution like McGill who's interested in that field of study, and together we come up with a protocol which essentially outlines everything about the clinical study you're going to do, or everything about the scientific study you're going to do, from A to Z. And that if it's a clinical study, and if you're working in laboratory animals, it has to go through all these different review boards, safety boards, etc. And once you run the study, you get the data, and we don't get the data. The data is given to an independent statistician, or the professor has, his own statistician. They generate the data, and based on what the data says, they write a paper. And then they submit that paper to a journal. Now, very often that journal doesn't accept the paper. So you have to go from journal to journal, or they ask you to rewrite certain sections because they have what are called peer reviews in those journals. And so they get other scientists who are interested in the subjects of this journal to review the paper, and they're extremely critical. And so, it's like you do all this work, and there's no guarantee you get the paper published. And so there's journals out there that are, very difficult to publish in, that don't accept, certain research subjects. And so it can be a long process getting a paper published. I mean, one of our papers, I think we went to probably like 5 journals. And sometimes these guys, they're busy and they just sit on the paper for a month, 2 months. And so like publishing a paper can take a year and a half sometimes. So you have to have a lot of patience.
Definitely. Interesting. What is the difference between Immunical whey versus whey font and other brands? There's so much whey product out in the market today. What's the difference between Immunical's and other people's whey products?
There's many different types of whey protein on the market and many different ways to produce it. And as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Bunos, when we started the company many years ago, he went around and visited a number of different dairies and found that Glanbia, their production process, met with the specs that he had in mind when developing a commercial product. So the specifications in terms of the production process, the cows, the way the cows are fed, etc., all met with his specifications. So Immunical is produced to maximize this glutathione enhancing property, whereas other companies, produce products for cake mixes, for bodybuilder supplements, etc., where their focus is on the protein content, etc. But everything that, it goes into producing Immunical in terms of, the proteins we look at, the concentrations of those proteins, is designed to maximize that glutathione enhancing property. And this is not something, that was available. I mean, this is something that Dr. Bunos had to learn. And, so we have 40 years of kind of intellectual property that we've developed where, we can collaborate with the dairy and coach the dairy on this is what we're looking for. Whereas other companies just, they phone the dairy up and they get supplied a product and they don't really know, very much about that product, and they add different ingredients in it and then they go and sell it.
Very interesting. Yeah, well, I would want some clean whey products. I wouldn't want anything that's not really tested, because my next question would be, is the Immunical product third-party tested? And do they have scientific reviews on human studies instead of animal studies? I think you probably already answered some of that earlier. But is it third-party tested?
Yeah. So when we informally were involved in sports, and that's probably, back in 2010, we're working with Dr. Nathan Lewis, and he wanted to get Immunical. He was with the English Institute of Sport, and he wanted to get Immunical for his sailors. So these are Olympic sailors, and before we would send any, we had to have the product tested. So we started doing testing on the product back then. And eventually, we became more formalized, and with Sport, Platinum, Immunical, all those products are now tested before they're given to athletes. In addition to that, there have been universities that have, on their own volition, ordered Immunical and tested it in laboratory animals without us knowing. And, all of a sudden the paper shows up and, we see that Immunical was used in a particular experiment. So we've funded testing, but you have to understand that when you fund a testing, this is not where we send it to, a lab for hire, like many companies do. We're going to academic institutions where, that data is going to get published, and you have an independent statistician looking at that. So you can't fudge the data when you're working like that. You can if you're, there's many dishonest people out there, and dishonest doctors, dishonest scientists that will set up something and fudge the data just to, prove a point. But, if you look at the people that we've collaborated with, and these people have published many, many articles, the reputation is very important to them. And, these are the institutions that we're working with, are leading institutions. And so, we can stand on the data that we publish.
Very, very impressive. What makes your glutathione powder stand out from the rest of the market?
Well, I would say, we have a 40-year head start on many of these companies, and that accumulated wisdom and knowledge, all the testing we've done, all that experience, whether you're talking about the work in performance, the work on the brain that we started, the work on autism, etc. We have a lot of knowledge now about the product, and we apply that to making sure that we put out the best product possible.
That's very impressive. Yeah, I know that the brain study is just phenomenal with the success rates of people that have different disorders in the brain.
Well, since we're talking about it, I'll let you in on a secret, okay? But don't tell anybody beyond this call, okay?
Okay, you guys are privileged.
So the population we're studying are mild cognitive impairment, and so about 50% of that population goes on to develop Alzheimer's. And so MCI kind of falls under the umbrella of unhealthy brain aging. And so what's interesting is back in November, we started looking through the data of the study. So we set the study up at McGill through the Montreal Jewish Hospital in their memory clinic in conjunction with the Montreal Neuro. And so the neuropsych, part of what we did was we analyzed the brains of all these people through imaging, but also like in the autism study, they had to go through and answer all these standardized tests to look to see if there's any changes in behavior, memory, etc. And the neuropsych guy said to me, as well as the neurologist who's the PI in the study, the principal investigator, he says, once you have that diagnosis, you never improve. And so once you're on that trajectory, it's a steady slope downhill. And I'll tell you that the Immunical group improved in some aspects of that brain performance. And so, the way you have to consider that is, there's very few absolutes in medicine and very few wins in medicine. You're talking about getting 5% here, 6% there, 7% there, a 10% gain here. So the fact that we were able to change the trajectory on these patients is very important. And so that's going to be coming out probably within the next year.
So you gave us a head start on this. Thank you so much. This is great. This is great news.
But you can't tell anybody.
No, but guys, just keep that between yourselves, okay?
Okay.
But there's a lot of brain disorders around, and this is
Italian. Just make sure Keith Hooper doesn't tell anybody, okay? Because he's been known to tell a tale.
I know, Keith,
especially when he gets a drink in his hand.
Keith, you got to keep promise. Also, with talking about drink, alcoholics have benefited from Immunical, correct? They said it helps a lot. So I'm sure Keith is, he's doing all right. Keith don't drink that. But yeah, but that's nice. I'm glad that worked out with people having brain disorders. How does the manufacture of Immunical differ from other whey proteins, and what is the ingredients of the?
Yeah, it's whey protein. So as I mentioned earlier, the focus is on, there's many different components to whey protein in milk. Mm-hmm. There was a group in London that looked at milk and identified over 200 peptides in milk. So there's many different fractions, and it's the synergy between these fractions that provides the effect. So understanding the particular ratio of these fractions, which fractions is, what we've learned over time.
Can excess glutathione, perhaps over 3,000 milligrams, cause complications such as abdominal cramps, trouble breathing, and severely allergic reactions such as whitening of the skin? Are you aware of any?
That's again, there are all these questions about the delivery system. Mm-hmm. And the model for Dr. Bunos was what happens in nature. And the beauty about Immunical is physiologic. So Immunical, his inspiration was mammalian milk, and mammalian milk is the essential food for all mammalian neonates. And the primary component in mammalian milk is whey protein. So mm-hmm. those key whey proteins, also exist in human milk. And, you don't see glutathione in mammalian milk in any species. You see protein that's broken down into its constituent amino acids, etc. And so what he found was this is the best delivery system to increase glutathione. Now there are different methodologies to increase glutathione, and those can be used in situations where you need an immediate spike in glutathione. As Dr. Gutman talks about, if somebody appears in the emergency room, you need to boost their glutathione right away if they're coming in for an overdose. So Immunical wouldn't work, but taking oral glutathione, probably 95% of it doesn't survive, the digestive tract and absorption. So these are things you're essentially wasting your money. And then, you're taking those kinds of doses, which is a very, very high dose. You're going to run into those kinds of problems.
Yeah, so there's a lot of glutathione tablets on the market, so they don't provide the delivery process, correct? You're saying they
No,
don't?
it's not physiologic. So it's, it doesn't survive digestion, absorption, and most of it goes out. And the body's not equipped to take that.
Right. I guess because
It's not the ideal way to do it.
I know, I guess because glutathione is now becoming a household name, and people just think when they heard the name and they go into a health shop and see glutathione tablets, they get excited because there's so much literature of the benefits of having glutathione in your body because you make it, but they're not understanding what the product's actually made of. And
Well, that's where you get corrupt people that will take advantage of something like that and send them down the wrong road with the wrong information, and they don't care. They're lining their pockets, and then they don't give a hoot about their customers.
exactly. What are the benefits of taking the Muni-Cal daily? What are the benefits?
Well, as I mentioned, the all these different factors in our environment. There's probably since World War II 100,000 new chemicals in the environment, and many of these chemicals combine. And the reason you're seeing increases in things like cancers, increases in thyroid problems, hormonal problems, is diabetes, partly due to the environment. And so Immunical, by boosting glutathione, plays a critical role in making you more resilient to adapt to this new environment. The environment is changing faster than evolution is changing us. And, I learned these things because the university where we did the work on autism, these kids, because they have a glutathione deficiency, are very sensitive to toxins in the environment. So I had extended discussions with these scientists down there, and they talked about that. And this was, after the immune system, this was Dr. Bunos's favorite subject. So we talked, and I read extensively on this. Kids that grow up close to intersections where you have a high volume of traffic, their risk for cancers, for lung diseases goes way up versus the normal children. So, these are all things that you have to take into account, and consuming the product over time gives you a greater capacity to deal with these things.
What is the best method what's the best method to mix all brands of the Muni-Cal? Can I use water, juice, yogurt, or milk? What's the best method of mixing in Muni-Cal?
That's that really depends on your customer. So, for instance, I put it in my cereal after training. You can put it in cereal and yogurt, in juice and chocolate milk. It really depends on the customer.
It's interesting. For many, many years, I've been putting water or juice in my cup. But like you said, lately I've been putting it in my oatmeal cereal, just turning it around, I mix it with yogurt, oatmeal, and my Muni-Cal, and it's so delicious.
Yeah. I hope the oatmeal is not hot.
No, because I know the heat will destroy the enzymes, so I'm very, very much aware of that. Because
Yeah.
I don't want it to. I know those enzymes are very sensitive, so no, I don't put no heat to it. And I also try to acknowledge with people that they shouldn't put it in a blender because it would destroy everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. How does the Muni-Cal work with people who are underweight? Can one gain weight?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it depends on why they're underweight. You can be underweight for many reasons. You can have catabolic weight loss, you can have an infection, you can have stomach problems, Crohn's disease. So it really depends on why. But if you have catabolic weight loss, and we studied this in stage 4 cancer patients, and Dr. Droog was actually the first to identify what's called the Droog syndrome. So this is weight loss where you lose muscle mass associated with the disease process. And in unhealthy aging, you also have loss of muscle mass, so specifically in the legs. And so, in those cases, certainly Immunical can help put on muscle mass.
The last question, And how does Immunical work with people who are overweight? Can one lose weight? That's the last question for the
Yeah,
day.
well, so Immunical, I mean, it's 40 calories per pack. And so it's all about, caloric intake versus output. So reduce your caloric intake and increase your output.
Well, at this time, John, thank you very, very much for taking the time to come on the Zoom meeting and for my customers and new customers for explaining the importance of Immunical and glutathione. Thank you so, so much. And you have a very good evening. I know you have lots to do, but I want to thank you for your time. Thank you, Keith, for being the host of running this, because there are times with me with Zoom, I'm not always on it. So Keith, thank you so much. John, I know he's in the backdrop, but I want to thank him as well for being my mentor and being a part of what I do for Immunical and Immunitech. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close this meeting, and if you should need any product, you know how to get a hold of me, or email. If you have any questions, you can email me at Sousa, ISOUSA at infinity-bda.com. Thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed it.
Take care. Thank you, Italian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.